Hi guys, I am Hazel and welcome to my channel. As you can tell from the title, today I am reviewing the movie Crazy Rich Asians. If you haven't watched my previous video called Singaporeans React to Crazy Rich Asians, I'd recommend you watch that first and then head over here to watch this video, because in that video I talk about the trailer and the marketing and basically about what I think it's going to be. That's not a review about the movie. This one is. And I was kind of debating whether I should film this one because I'd already done like a react to. But then I watched the movie and I watched it twice. It's still super fresh in my memory. And in the comments of my previous video, there were people saying that, have you watched the movie? I want to know what you think. Oh my gosh, you're gonna cry. Can you do a review? And I would love to hear a review. And I was like, oh, well, maybe I should film it. I'm not a film critic, I am not a film reviewer, I don't go in depth and talk about the mise-en-scène and stuff like that, so don't expect that from this video. I'm just gonna talk about my opinions and thoughts from a point of view of a Singaporean and also from an audience and a consumer. Also, today I'm sticking with the red lipstick because red means prosperity. Very apt. But I'm gonna leave some of the spoilers till the end of this video. So the movie Crazy Rich Asians came out in cinemas quite a while ago, and that was why I was thinking if I should film this, because it's been kind of a while. But then I felt so passionately and strongly about this movie that I just had to film this video. Basically, if you don't know what Crazy Rich Asians is about, is where this Asian American girl meets this Singaporean guy and she doesn't know that he's rich, and she basically goes to Singapore to meet his extremely wealthy family and is kind of caught in that whole thing where the mother-in-law's approval is super important, and it's kind of like a bit intimidating as well. Also, I haven't read the book, so I'm not going to be referencing it or doing any comparisons, but I think the thing is, a lot of people think that this movie is going to be a rom-com, and I get where it is. Like, it is romantic and it's hilarious, but what I took away from that is that the love story is second, family is first, and the growth of the main female lead, Rachel. So more of that than I feel it's a love story, if you know what I mean. So just briefly about how I felt watching it before going in depth into the actual movie. I was so impressed and so just like excited and happy to see Singapore on the big screen portrayed in such an amazing way, because I think the last time I saw Singapore, like the landscape in a movie, was where it was destroyed. I think so. So just to see it so magnificently portrayed is amazing, and I was just blown away. I have absolutely no complaints about the movie. I don't think I could critique it or just like, there's nothing I could complain about. Like, it's all positive things, it's all good things, and I think that's the reason why I watched it again, and I would watch it again and again and again, and I would get the DVD. I'm gonna read the book. It was just so good, and I would highly recommend it to you. If you are not Asian, I would just go watch it because it's a film for everybody, and I think that everyone could relate to some part of it. As for the casting, I think the casting is incredible. They couldn't have done a better job. I did watch interviews after the movie. You know, when like after a movie you go online and you're like, I have to read everything. Basically I like watched interviews, I read stuff, and the way like they took time to cast is absolutely spot on. Michelle Yeoh, who plays the mom, she is legendary. She was in Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. She was in The Mummy. She was in Star Trek, Guardians of the Galaxy. Like, just such a legendary Asian actress, and she plays the role so well that I was actually afraid of her. But at the same time, the person that she plays doesn't surprise me because I have actually seen Asian mothers like that before, so it's really like relatable. Not saying that I've experienced anything like that, but and I think casting Constance Wu as the main lead, Rachel, is incredible because she's the lead in Fresh Off the Boat, which is the first of its kind for a sitcom about an Asian American family. And also, as I was watching the movie, I'm gonna be honest here, as I was watching the movie and the grandmother came out, I was like, I have never seen this old lady before. Why did they cast her? I'm very curious. And then I went to do my research and I went and saw that she was actually in the cast of Joy Luck Club. So you know how they were saying that Crazy Rich Asians is the first all-Asian cast in 25 years? The last movie was Joy Luck Club, and the grandmother in Crazy Rich Asians is from that movie. So it came in a complete full circle and it blew my mind. I was thinking like, oh, okay, they might film it in Singapore, but how many Singaporean actors are there? And in my previous video, I did list down all the Singaporean actors that I recognize based on name. But then when I was actually watching the film, I'm like, I've seen him before. I've seen like all these cameos that are on screen for like 5 minutes or less are Singaporean actors that I have seen on local channels, local dramas, and I've watched them since I was young, and it was just crazy to me that like now I'm seeing them in a Hollywood movie on the big screen. Even the one white guy who plays the hotel manager in the beginning of the movie, he's a Singaporean actor that I've watched when I was like 5, and it's just crazy but also so good at the same time that you show not just Singapore and its beautiful landscape, but you also show the local actors and the faces of Singapore, and I think that's what made it so believable. And I'd have to say Aquafina was absolutely hilarious. I laugh every single time. The one thing I do have to point out is that Mrs. Goh, Peck Lin's mom, she is the most Singaporean character in the movie. If you want to see what a typical Singaporean auntie is and the way she acts and the way she speaks, that is the perfect representation. You know, in my previous video I said, okay, as for Singapore representation, the accent, they're obviously not gonna speak with a Singaporean accent in the movie, but Mrs. Goh, she sounds so Singaporean, and I love that they included one character that sounded like her. So I thought that was just absolutely brilliant. Also, I freaking love Gemma Chan. Ever since I saw her from Sherlock, I've always loved her, and then just to see her play Astrid in this movie, she is everything that I want to be in person and in the movie. I'm like, she is so elegant, so poised. I wish I spoke like her. But oh my gosh, like I think her being casted as Astrid is perfect, like perfection. Now I'm gonna talk about the locations. In my previous video I said that like, oh, it was filmed in Singapore, blah blah blah, and a lot of people in the comments did correct me and say, oh, parts of it was filmed in Malaysia as well. And so I went to do my research, do my googling, and now I know which parts were filmed in Malaysia. And obviously I think it's quite telling as well when you watch the film to know which parts were filmed in Malaysia. Spoiler alert, but you probably have seen this in the trailer. When they do the drone shot of Tyrosol Park and you see the whole estate of Nick's house, Nick's grandmother's house with the pond and just the mansion and the little like pagoda thing. When I saw that on camera, I was like, no way in heck is this in Singapore. Like, if we had that much land for one house in Singapore, that would be taken to build multiple apartment blocks. No one would own such a big house in Singapore. So I did my research. The main mansion and the little pagoda thing was in Malaysia, and it was also built, the little pagoda thing was built in front, but everything else was CGI. So that's the part. And also the part where they go for the bachelorette party, that was filmed in Langkawi in Malaysia as well. There are some interior venues that were filmed in mansions and places in Malaysia, but other than that, landscape wise, mostly Singapore. That's what I know. And I just think that it was so nice that not only did they film the normal touristy parts of Singapore, like Marina Bay Sands Casino and the Merlion and the Art Science Museum and the Gardens by the Bay Super Trees, but they also showed like the shop houses in Singapore, where it's more traditional old school Singapore in like the 1960s, where that's what you would see. And also like the hawker centers. The part where they did the food scene was, to me, such a great inclusion, because not only did they not show them eating at some fancy restaurants, but eating super local food. And the food is a huge part of Singapore, and I love that they showed it, because when I try to explain to people what the food scene is like in Singapore, they don't really grasp it, because they're like, what's a hawker center? Oh, do you mean a food court? I'm like, you know, like it's not just McDonald's and KFC and whatnot in the same food court, but it's like just many small stalls serving one or two or a few dishes, and then you order multiple of them, and then you come and sit together and eat everything, and you share it with everyone. It's a bit of a hard concept to grasp, and that's why I love that they include it in the movie, because when it's finally shown, I was like telling my boyfriend that is what I was talking about. That is exactly what I was talking about. And the fact that like Nick goes around and speaks to them in Mandarin and in Malay and in English and in dialect and in like Hokkien and Cantonese and stuff like that, it just shows how multicultural we are, and I love that. Like, you eat Chinese food and Indian food and Malay food and all these things. It made me miss home so much, and it also made me super hungry. They showed my favorite chicken wings, and I was in the cinema like drooling. I can't wait to go back and have some chicken wings. So that to me was like a super iconic scene. And I also love that in the movie, Araminta was just in like a tank top and like her glasses, no makeup, super casual. And I was like, I love that. I love that they don't doll them up too much. It's supposed to be like Crazy Rich Asians, wealthy, you know, posh and whatnot, but they're just so casual and chilled. And I think that's what people do at home too, like, because the weather is just so hot and humid, like you don't even want to dress up, you just want to go in like shorts and slippers and t-shirts. That was like a super important standout scene. I think to a lot of people it's kind of like, oh, they're having a meal, they're showing, but that is iconically Singapore. Take away all the touristy things, take away all the beautiful sights, that food scene, that is what makes Singapore Singapore, essentially. So the one thing I think a lot of people can relate to me, especially all the comments that I got in my previous video, was that you're gonna cry, you're gonna cry, you're gonna cry. And I was like, am I really going to cry? I thought it was supposed to be a happy kind of feel-good type movie, like why am I gonna cry? And when the movie started and I was just watching and stuff, I was like, who's gonna die? Who's gonna die? Is somebody gonna die? But then it's true, like for some reason I started crying. Well, not like bawling, but like there are scenes in the movie that made me tear up. Not only is it super lovey-dovey, emotional, mushy kind of crying, but also like heartwarming and touching, and it's just really impactful. And I was watching interviews and stuff like that, and like I think some of the cast members are saying that, you know, people come out of the movie crying and they don't know why they're crying, because they're like, oh my gosh, we've never got to see like anything like that. I haven't gotten to see myself or my family member, something like that, represented in the movie, and it's super relatable. And I think that is so true. Like, I mean, I wasn't crying because I saw somebody like on there, but I think it was more of like, were just being portrayed in a different and better light. And to quote one of the interviews, it's like, no one is doing kung fu, no one's fleeing a village, like we're we're just represented in a much better light, and that just makes me happy. But I think the parts that I cried at was during the wedding, because I think it was so beautiful, a little bit over the top and a little bit extravagant, but I guess the Youngs had to put their 40 million somewhere. And I cried during the mahjong scene, which I'll talk about in a little bit, but I cried during that part, and I cried during the last part on the plane. I don't want to delve into too much because I feel like the people who have watched the movie know exactly what I'm talking about, so I don't need to go into detail, but those are the 3 parts that I cried because I was just so emotional and so happy and just like, oh, it's so sweet and it's so cute. So I want to talk about relatability, and I think the beginning scene when it was actually set in London, obviously it's like a very exaggerated portrayal of what racism can be like, but I feel like a lot of Asians have felt that before, whether it's in a very minuscule amount or a super like in your face experience. And when I watched that, I had never like myself experienced something so blatant before, but I could see how it was relatable, and I was like, oh snap. You know what I mean? And I think it doesn't matter who you are or where you come from or what race you are. I think everyone can kind of relate to that scene in a way, which I thought was very like poignant, and which I thought was a really brilliant way to start off the film. And as for like the family approval thing, that to me is super relatable. I wouldn't say my family is like that, but I do know of people and friends whose families are still very traditional Chinese and kept with the values and stuff. And I was like, yes, it's probably new to a lot of people, but in terms of like the Asian culture, that's super common. And also, I wouldn't say that I'll be able to speak for the Asian Americans, but this film was in a way supposed to target both Asian Americans and just generally Asians. And I did read reviews and interviews and stuff like that where like Asian Americans are like, oh my gosh, this, I totally relate to that. It's always been like a debate of the whole identity thing, so I love that this movie kind of addresses that at the same time. And although I'm not Asian American, I am an Asian living in the UK, where it's a predominantly white country. I would say that like it made me appreciate my culture a lot more. And I hope that's not like a backhanded compliment in a way, because I am super lucky and super blessed that my parents sent me here to study and have a good education. But at the same time, being here and being away from family and stuff just makes me appreciate my Asian roots a little bit more, because people here are so fascinated about Singapore and so fascinated about where I come from and stuff, and then I start to educate them about my country, and then I start talking about the really good things that I think a lot of Singaporeans take for granted about Singapore. And I was like, actually, like there's so many good things about the Asians. And on top of that, watching that film in the UK with just all kind of different like ethnicities sat in the cinema and seeing my country on the big screen, I think it was just like kind of surreal. And even my boyfriend who was sat beside me, he would be like, Singapore, Singapore. I'm like, yes, this whole thing is set in Singapore. But he was just so excited, and I think he was trying to register that like my girlfriend's from Singapore. And I think that's super telling, because you don't see very much of that on the big screen. Like for example, if you see London on the big screen, you're not gonna be like, oh my god, it's in London. You know, it's kind of like, yeah, a lot of movies are filmed there, you know. But for him to be like, that's where my girlfriend, like that's her country, that's like, it was, I think it was a super huge moment. And I think that's why like a lot of people resonated with it so much. And so another thing about Singapore representation and the relatability is that during the beginning of the movie, you see like text boxes come up on the screen, and I love that they included a lot of like Singapore slangs in those text boxes, because obviously, like I said in my previous videos, if we spoke Singlish and if we spoke with a Singaporean accent, a lot of people wouldn't get it and a lot of people wouldn't understand the movie, so they couldn't. But then the fact that they included all these Singaporean like slangs and speakings and the way of texting in the actual text boxes told me that they have done their research, that they do want to represent Singapore properly. Obviously, a lot of people might agree or disagree with me, because there are some articles that say how this movie didn't portray Singapore to its full potential. But at the same time, I think the movie did a really good job at introducing people to it. You don't want to just bombard people like with all the information and be like, this. Like, it's just too much. But I think it was brilliant in like showcasing and introducing people to Singapore. And also a huge scene to me, which was like such a standout scene, and I think you see this a lot on Facebook where people are sharing articles about it and stuff, is the mahjong scene. And I think it was just so brilliantly filmed and so emotional, and that's why I cried, because I was like, oh my gosh. I just think it's so well choreographed that's what made it such a standout scene. It was so good. You have to watch the movie just to see it for itself and how it's done. Like, it's amazing. So that was basically my thoughts about the movie. Now I kind of want to talk about what this movie means. I just think it's opening just a lot of doors, also with how well it's done at the box office and stuff. I hope it shows other filmmakers that we do want to see Asians on the big screen as well. Obviously, you don't have to do a whole other all Asian cast, but like just to have a little bit more representation. Like, a lot of people were saying, oh my god, these were how black people felt when Black Panther came out, and I could totally relate to that. And the main thing I want to talk about is how like a direct impact I've noticed. My cousin was born and raised in the UK, and she's half British, and then she went back to Singapore for a holiday and she watched Crazy Rich Asians when it came out in cinemas then. And then now she's come back, and after being in Singapore and after watching in Singapore, she was telling her parents about how in the future she wants to work and live in Singapore. And then she also said that now she wants to learn Mandarin. And that to me just made my heart feel so full and so warm, because I'm like, that's how much of an impact this movie has had, and I've seen it directly. I've read reviews and people saying it online and stuff, but like to see this impact and this impression it's made on like my 14-year-old cousin is incredible, because if she does go and learn Mandarin, she can finally like speak to my grandmother. And I don't know, that made me just feel so much feels. And my grandmother had always said, oh, I wish I could like communicate better with my grandchildren. Like, I'm the only one that can really communicate with her, because my other cousins are in Australia. So the fact that like my cousin here, who had been born and raised in England, had always spoken English her whole life and hadn't had a need to actually speak Mandarin, and now wants to learn her mother tongue because of this movie. Well, not solely because of this movie, but I mean, the influence is there. It's just so amazing, and I think that's why this movie is so important. And not just this movie, but any other movie that has that amount of representation is just so important, and I love it, and I love that. And I think that's why I feel so passionate about it, and that's why I had to do this review. I hope I didn't miss anything out, and if I did, please tell me in the comments below. I highly recommend you go and watch it. If you haven't, please do watch it in cinemas. I do recommend that because it's so spectacular and so big, and it's just something that you have to see on the big screen, I would say. I love the movie so much. I definitely want a sequel, and I think there is going to be one, and I cannot wait. I'm so excited. If you guys have any comments or thoughts or opinions, please leave it in the comment section down below. Tell me if you've watched it, tell me what you love, tell me what you think they could have done better, tell me what you don't like about it, like just sound off below. And yeah, if you like this video, give it a thumbs up, and also subscribe to me if you haven't already. And I guess that's about it. I will see you in the next video. Bye! Also, I'm ready for some Asian representation on YouTube. Hint.